Okay, hello everyone. Java Programming CS187 for Grants, New Mexico, NMSU. And today we're going to be talking about Module 4 and some issues that have been brought up as far as just simple issues, but mostly just issues of familiarity and just getting used to terminologies. And I think it's really important that we get to see what coding looks like, and that makes it easier, I think, for most of us to understand what's going on. So first off, as soon as I find my proper Zoom button, we're going to, before we get started, do we have any questions that anyone has on previous assignments? Let me turn that off. Crazy minions are laughing at us. That'll be good on the video. Yes, that's my fault. All right, I don't see any questions, so we're going to go ahead and get started. All right, so what we dealt with last week was classes and methods, and I wrote a simple program that kind of shows you how the interactivity works. Today I wanted to do something a little bit different. And we're going to look at a program that I wrote, and then we're going to go over it and talk about each of the different functions and to kind of familiarize yourself with it. And this will be part of the topics that you will be working on in Module 4. And I believe Module 4, we are going to be going over really writing our first programs. That's part of your assignment. And so I want everybody to feel a little more comfortable with that. And so let's go ahead and get started. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and share my screen showing Eclipse. Hopefully everybody has started to work with Eclipse a little bit. That's not the one, but welcome all the same. Let me find it. Okay, here we go. For whatever reason, it didn't want to show it. Okay, so we're back in Eclipse, and the first thing I want to do is we're going to go over setting up a project and getting you ready for your assignments. We went over this briefly last week, but it is important in order to get used to setting up projects constantly. So we're going to go ahead and do that first. So we're going to go to File, go to New, and we're going to set up a new project. Switch out of this and go to regular. There we go. I was in the EE version, which is the Enterprise Edition, which allows for web programming. Okay, so a new project. And in the assignment, of course, I said for you to set up CS187, but as you notice over here on the side, I already have that set up, so we're going to just call this CS187 test, and we will finish. If you notice over here on the left, you have your package explorer, and here's the new project that we just set up. Now, for your assignment for this class, all assignments will be in this CS187 project. But if you're going to write other programs, you'll set new projects for those. Next, we'll go to Source. We'll go to New. We're going to set up a new package, and the format that I had you set up was your last name, first initial, and then the chapter that we're working on, and so this would be 4. And now when you look in to your source, you have that package, and within that package is where we're going to put our class. And we can just call this test. We'll use proper conventions on that. And so now we have our test class ready to be used, and that's the format you will use for every assignment that requires Java. Okay. If there's no questions on that, we're going to go ahead and move forward to something a little more interesting. And I saw this today, and I thought it would be kind of interesting. Planet weights. So I wrote a quick little program that takes your weight on Earth, and all that it does is it converts it from your current weight, and then it tells you what your weight would be on Mercury, the Moon, and on Jupiter. And this is a nice little example that gets to use several different components, starting with the scanner class right here. And though we have it, we're going to go ahead and write it again. We're going to comment this out. And if you remember, commenting allows you to remove something from the compiler so it no longer tries to compile that. And one way that you can do that, especially when you have a lot of code, is highlight everything, hit Control and the /, and now you notice it has the comments right there, and this will no longer be seen by the compiler. And to test that, we can go ahead and say run, and let's see, I guess I have to move this over here. There we go. There's nothing in here. As you notice, it's blank over here. So we're going to go ahead and start. Now, the first thing that we need to do is we need to comment our way through our code. And this is really standard practice when you're not sure what coding you need, but you do have an idea of what you want to do. So the simplest way is to start with a comment, and say, what's the first thing I want to do? And since our project is entering the weight of a person, we're going to want to get user input, right? So we can say user input from keyboard. We could come down and write another comment that says, what else do we want to do? Well, we need to know the weight. Let's go ahead and state what the weight is on Earth. And as you notice, we're just building each of the steps. We're going to do Mercury, so we need to state the weight for Mercury. And what do we also, in addition to that, we need to know what the formula is for the weight. So we can go ahead and put that formula for weight. And we go down and we can do that again, obviously repeating this process again. You can just copy it. And the next one we want to look at is the moon. And then we can come down here again, and we can say for Jupiter. Now, I looked these up on Google. Now, I want to show you a little trick right there. You notice how it's kind of messed up. In fact, we're going to go ahead and mess some of this up and make it look really unattractive. One of the shortcuts in Google is, in Eclipse, is to hit Control, Shift, and F, and it makes it all nice and pretty for you. Helps you keep it organized. Now we're going to go ahead and move this down out of the way. So let's go back up to the top here. Use input from keyboard. So we need to have a class that allows us to use the keyboard. And I think it's this week or next week, you'll actually start writing code for this, but I want you to get used to seeing it and the conventions. And so the convention is scanner. Then we have to assign a variable. We're creating an object right now. And I always use keyboard. A lot of times you'll see programmers that use input. I choose not to use input because it's rather generic, and it could be input from what. I like to break it down and keep the input specific. So if I was using mouse, I would say mouse. If I was using webcam, I would be specific with it. And in this case, we're using keyboard. We will then assign that to a new class, and that is part of the scanner. And then we have the system.in declaration, and that tells us, quite simply, we're taking something from the system and we're inputting it. When we do the system out for printing, that's taking something from the system and obviously turning it out or printing it out. So what this does right here is allows us to take information printed on the keyboard and prints it into our program. Now, I'm going to delete this input. Notice these red lines right there, and we have another one right here under scanner. What that is telling us is that there is a problem. And if you notice, if you put your cursor over it, it tells you that there's 4 possible fixes. The first one, which is just about always the correct one, says to import the java.util.scanner class, which allows us to take input. And Eclipse has imported that for us. And that's one of the really nice things about Eclipse. Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to actually know where to input our data. And part of writing programs is developing an algorithm that you get used to. Each programmer has a different method, but the process is generally the same for each individual programmer. And in this case, mine is, I know I want to get something, so I want to be able to let the user know, hey dude, put some information here. And so we can do that by printing a line to the user that says, enter your weight. Now, remember, one of the shortcuts that you will use a bazillion times is SYSOUT, control space, and that is the shortcut for system out print line. And then we are going to go ahead and hit the double quotes. Remember that one of the shortcuts for Eclipse is that it fills in the second double quote for you, and we're just going to say enter your weight, if I can spell it right. So now we can save this real quick. We can go to our play button, our run button, and look right here, enter your weight. So now we have a statement that's telling the user, enter your weight. But if we enter a number, if you notice, there's nothing happening over here. And I am hitting the keyboard a whole lot. I hope you can hear it. And the reason for that is we have not told the program that, hey, take what the keyboard does. And how do we do that? And that's really important. So we need to declare a variable first off. And remember that you have 2 primary variable types when dealing with numbers. You have a double or you have an int. And the difference, a int is a solid number or an integer, like 4. A double allows you to have a decimal place. And when we're dealing with weight, and especially formulas, we're going to be dealing with percentages of weight. So we do need to have a double. And so now we're going to just give it a name, and we can call it weight, or we could call it Martian for all that matters. But it's best to use a variable that is clear as to its meaning. So we're going to go ahead and call it weight. And so now we have declared the type. We have the variable name. We use the equal sign to assign it a value. And this is what confuses most programmers, new programmers, is this calling or the declaration calling our keyboard. And the way we do that is we say what we want. The object we want is keyboard. So we type that in, keyboard. We use a dot. And once again, one of the nice features of Eclipse is it tells us all the possible commands that can follow that. Very rarely in programming will you ever get past what you see in the first screen area here. But in this case, we want a number, right? And so if you look, we have next integer, and what we want is what? We want the next double. And you notice that Eclipse has already said, hey, this is probably what you want, so it's moved it to the top of the list. And so we can go ahead and click that, and it puts it right there for us. And the only thing we need to do is finish our line syntax with a semicolon. So now if we review, we have started our program. We have our public class. We named it Planet Weight. We have our main statement, which is required. If you have not taken that test yet, when you get to that question, it is required. We have then declared our scanner keyboard right here. We have printed a statement that says to the user, enter your weight. And then we have told Java to take whatever comes out of the keyboard that is a double and make it or assign it to the value of weight. And we can confirm that. We can do a print statement right here. And you will use this print statement a lot as a means to test or make sure that you have gathered the right information. So now what I've done is I've done a system out print line, and what I told it to print is weight, which is in fact this right here. So if we have done it correctly, when we run it, we come over here and we enter a weight, we'll say 155. It should print out 155. So we know that this variable is now working properly. And we no longer need this because we know that it's doing its job. So the next thing we want to know is what is our weight on Earth? And we'll start with that. We'll say, so we're going to go ahead and do our sysout, control space, double quotes, and your, and I cannot get that to capitalize. There we go. Your weight on Earth is. Now let's think through. Juan, I'll get to your question in just a moment. Oh, it looks like we have Michelle Chrisman from Japan, I think Okinawa. If you can hear me, I see you on the list here. If you can hear me, say hello by chatting. That would be great. That's quite a time zone issue. And Juan, I will get to your question in one moment. Hey, there she is, 10:24 a.m. on Wednesday. Welcome, and thanks for showing up. If you have any questions, feel free to chat them, type them in the chat box there, Michelle, and we will get there. And that is great. So what we're dealing with is, I didn't notice when you popped in, but we're just writing a sample program talking about the different components, and this will be available online tomorrow. So any part that you did miss, you can hop in. Okay, so we're back here dealing with our print statement, and we're going to ask the question, what is our weight on Earth? Well, we just ask the user to enter their weight. And so we're assuming that they're giving us the weight on Earth. And so that weight then will simply be their weight on Earth is what they just gave us, right? And so we're going to go ahead and use the concatenation that we dealt with last week, which is tying a string or a series of numbers. And so we have our string right here. We're going to go ahead and add weight to it. And I misspelled it yet again. Okay, so now when we run it, should ask us what our weight is. We're going to say 155, and lo and behold, it says your weight on Earth is 155. Now, before we get any further, if you remember from your lesson, there are two types of print statements. There are print line, and there is a print. The difference being print line drops you down or starts a new line each time. I prefer that when we ask a user for information, that it's on the same line over here. So I'm going to remove that print line and run it one more time. And now when we enter our weight, oops, that might help if, did I save it? Oh, sorry, my bad. Get rid of that one, enter your weight, save, and now it will be on the same line. We can go ahead and leave this print line here for the new line. Okay, so your question one is, will doubles work for numbers without decimals? And the answer is yes. As you can see, it's working fine. However, if we open this up just a little more, it did add a decimal to it right here. And it's assuming that you want a decimal, and so it adds that in there. At this particular place, it doesn't really matter to us either way if the decimal is showing, but as soon as we start doing calculations, we do want that decimal, and so we'll go ahead and leave that as is. We could convert it, but it's all right here. All right, so now let's go ahead and go to the next stage in our program. So we wanted to say, okay, so we have it stated here on Earth. Let's go ahead and move that to right here. So we use the keyboard for input, state the weight on Earth, and then now what we want to do is state the weight on Mercury. And, oh yeah, so Mercury is 0.378. So let's go ahead and do the formula real quick for that. So we want to once again go ahead and declare a double, and we're going to name this variable Mercury. And now we can work with a formula. Remember, when you're dealing with numbers, you have the ability to assign it a specific number. You can use a variety of mathematical formulas and other variables, which is what we want to do in this case. We want to take the weight on Earth, and we want to multiply it by 0.378. And according to Google, your Earth weight times 0.378 is in fact your Mercury weight. And so there's our formula for that. Let's go ahead and clean this up just a little bit. Now what we want to do is we want to print that out. So once again, we're going to do a print statement. We're going to do SYSOUT, control space, and there's our print line, double quote. And now we're going to say your weight on Mercury is, kind of following our same convention up here for nice and clean. We're going to concatenate that with the plus sign. And now what we want to print is Mercury, right? That's what we want to know. So we're going to type in Mercury. Looks like do I have a misspelling somewhere? No, I don't. It doesn't look like it. Okay. And if you notice, let's go ahead and misspell this real quick. So now that it's misspelled, you see the red line under here. Not different from this red line that's telling us that's a spelling error. What this is telling us is that it doesn't have a match. It's saying it should have a variable somewhere, but that there's not one. So when we remove that, that goes away, and you see how it changes color. It's kind of hard to tell maybe, but it is now kind of a brown, kind of a tan, and it's changed colors, and it now matches this one right here. So what we're going to do is go ahead and save that. Once again, we're going to run it. We're going to try a new number. We're going to say that we're really light on Earth. And so it tells us your weight on Earth is 100 pounds. The weight on Mercury is 37.8, which is exactly what it should be based on our conversion. So now we have successfully taken keyboard input, printed out a variable, used a mathematical process, and finally printed out the mathematical formula that gives us Mercury. So at this point, we now have a system we can repeat, right? Now, they will tell you that the best programmers, and I see it all the time, are lazy programmers. And what that means is not that they're generally lazy, but they make the least amount of keystrokes required. And so standard practice is to copy and paste and simply change what we need to change. However, in order to build muscle memory and practice, I do want you to take the time to type it out. And so our next one is to state the weight for the moon. And so how do we do that? Well, we create a double. We're going to call that variable moon. We're going to assign it to weight on Earth, right? Times, and once again, I Googled it, and it's 0.166. Of course, you could have Googled it, and it may be slightly different. So now we have stated our weight, which is here, and then we want to print it out, right? SYSOUT, control space, double quote, and your weight on, I guess we need the moon, is, add the plus sign, the plus operator for concatenation, and we're going to add in what we want to concatenate. And now we have the moon. Again, we take that process, save it, run it. So at 100 pounds, and part of your programming process is learning to think about what you should get. And using a known variable, a known weight, in this case, allows us to understand what we should get. And so if we use 100 pounds, the quick estimation, if we're multiplying it by 0.166, is it should be 16 pounds, right? So we can test that and make sure. And lo and behold, weight on the moon is 16.6 pounds. So we can repeat this process over and over as many times as you want. We're only going to do it one more time. I'm going to try to mess this up and make it kind of funky for you so we can do a couple more shortcuts. Let's move this one over here so it's nice and ugly. Now, remember what I told you? To prettify it, to format it, Control Shift F, and look at that. All beautiful once again. Yeah, you got to prettify it. Okay, so the last one that we're going to do is Jupiter. What are we going to do? We're going to repeat the process, double Jupiter. What was the weight? 2.364. 2.364 is what we're multiplying it by. And what are we multiplying? Of course, weight on Earth. Don't forget, actually, we're going to leave that out so you can see right off the bat, Eclipse is throwing you an error. If you come over here to this little plus sign, it'll say syntax error, insert semicolon. See that right there? It's going to remind you that, hey, you're messing up, you're forgetting something. But we're going to go ahead and forget it again. And we're going to move to our next part. And you notice, see here when I return, it does not want to go back over here in line. It's because it's missing something. It thinks you're going to add more to this equation, which we're not. But so we're going to go ahead and do sys out. Remember, control space, double quote, and say your weight, exact weight on Jupiter is, we're going to come over here, we're going to use our plus operator, and we're going to put Jupiter. We seem to think everything is good. We're going to save it, and we run. Now we got an exception error. And it tells you right off the bat that it says syntax error, insert semicolon to complete local variable statement. And it tells you where it's at, line 27. Now, we already knew that's where it's at because we did that on purpose. And we have this great big red X over here saying, hey, you forgot something. So we'll go ahead and put in our semicolon. You notice it goes away. If you do look at it, you can still see that there's a little bit of a reminder, and that is tied to this because we have not saved it. Now that we've saved it, notice it goes away. We run it. Once again, we're going to use our test variable of 100. If we look at it real quick, we know it should be what? 236.4 pounds, right? And we get pretty much that. We get 999999999, which is okay. Now, in a couple of chapters, you're going to learn how to format. We're not going to go over that today. You're going to learn how to format that to either round this up to a 40 or at least get rid of this long line of 9s. So let's take a brief moment here. We're going to go back over this. Let's go ahead and remove this now that we don't need our equations down there. And we're going to look at what we've done. One of the things that Eclipse helps us with is to find ordered pairs. And if you notice, I click on this curly brace right here, and it puts a box around this one. So that's telling us we have a complete. Now let's go ahead and add another one in here. First, we get an error because we have an extra over here, and it tells us we need to make a pair out of it. But if we click on it, you notice it comes down here to the end. It's trying to find the closest match that it can. But when we go to the one in front of it, nothing highlights. And you can do this, especially when you start getting into large if statements and things like that, where you have curly brace city. It's good to know that you can start to track down where you're at. And of course, this is an extra. We don't need it, so we can go ahead and get rid of it. So we have created our public class right here, goes from here to here, and that's called planet weight. Notice the camel casing and the capital to begin with. The first word is capitalized. We then created our public static void main, and with the string box args, and we have included our curly braces there. Remember, this is required in every program. Now, you can have multiple classes. We could have pages and pages of classes, but somewhere in our first program, we have to have this static void main as it's written here. We then used comments to give us an idea of what we want to accomplish, kind of the flow of our program. And then finally, we started building it after we used the comments. We created the scanner class that allows us to take information from the keyboard. Now remember, this scanner, new scanner, system in, all of this is mandatory. What is optional is this, and you can call it whatever you want. You could call it typo thingy if you want. It doesn't make any difference. Of course, now you see we're getting an error here, so we would have to change that also to typo thingy, and once again, it would now work. This can be anything you want, but I recommend that you use something descriptive as to how you're getting your information. You will see in the textbook, sometimes he does use input. I don't remember, he uses other things, but that is programmer's choice. Good convention is be descriptive, and that includes variables, that includes anytime you're naming classes or methods or any objects. The more descriptive you are, the easier it is for you to come back, as well as for another programmer. And programming is a team sport. That's one of the things that is often neglected in college classes, is to remind us that it is a team sport. You will be working with other programmers, and the better you do, the better your life will be. And there will be times when you come across somebody who calls this K, for instance. And I've seen that used a lot. And you're like, what in the world is a K? And it's right here, it's easy enough to figure out. But imagine you had 10,000 lines of code and you're only given 2,000 lines from 8,000 to 10,000, and you're trying to figure out what does K mean. Keep them descriptive. It will save you a lot of hassle. The next thing we did was we printed a statement to the user that said, enter your weight. We allowed them to then enter their weight. We created a double to store that weight. And then we told the keyboard to go get it, and we told the keyboard to go get the next double. Now, let's change this. Let's say we decided to call this an integer. How does this change? Well, if you said it would be next int, you are correct. So now we can save it. We can run it. we enter a number, and you notice it works perfectly fine. And the reason for that is that typically, most of us don't say I weigh 129.34 pounds. We just say I weigh 129 pounds. And so we can get away with the int. And because we have declared each of these subsequent variables as a double, when it multiplies by this double over here, it gives us a result that's a decimal, and that's okay because these are, in fact, decimal or double variables. So that works fine. Let's go ahead and add one more thing to it, just so that you can see it. Let's say that we want to ask the name first, okay? So let's go ahead and make a string. Remember, all names, anything with letters is going to be a string or a char, and that's only one. So let's go ahead and make it, we're going to declare it, we're going to call it name. And now what do we want? Well, we want to use the keyboard. And if you notice, thanks to Eclipse, it popped up and said, hey, you probably want next line. If you're not for sure, you can come over here and read this, and it says it advances the scanner from the current line, and you can read all that. But yes, we want next line. And what do we do at the end? Semicolon. So now we can get a name, but we don't have a way to user to know that we've done it. So we'll go ahead and type out a message. And we do that again, of course, SYSOUT. And I repeat this 1,000 times because it will save you a lot of time if you're using Eclipse. If you're using a notepad or a different kind of browser or an IDE, or maybe you're using command line, you will have to type out system.out.println and put that information in. And so we can say, what is your name? And then what goes here? Right, semicolon. Okay, so now we'll save it. We will run it one more time. What is your name? And if you notice, where did it go? Dropped one line down because we have that print line in there, which I do not like. So let's go ahead and just fix it right now. Once again, what is your name? What is your weight? We'll try 200 this time. Holy smokes. And there we go. It calculates it all for us. The one thing that we do not have is a print out. So let's go ahead and finalize this just so we get to use our string. And let's go ahead and say, thanks for stopping by. And we want to add the variable. Let's look at a couple different ways. So we can go ahead and type it that way, and we can come down here again and type in name. Let's look at that. All right. One disadvantage is we're not running JUnity, so I do have to type this in. And it says, thanks for stopping by, Zach. But this is not nearly as clean and professional as using the concatenation or the plus operator. And so we can go ahead and say name. Get rid of this. Now, we'll run it one more time. I've decided to change my name to Bob. I am now Bob. I weigh 100 pounds, and there's the information that we wanted. So we have taken and actually done parts of the next two assignments, but what's really important is not to get afraid and just to simply try it. If you forget something, it'll tell you. Now, if you do get some really bizarre error up here, you can Google it or you can send me a message and we can figure it out. Pretty much the errors that you will get will be something like this. Say you have a misspelling here and it's going to tell you, but if you try to run it, notice it's going to run to here. And the reason it's working is that I didn't change one that's dead. Let's try that one. Is that you got your error here, and when you run it, it's going to give you an exception error, and it's going to tell you exception in thread main, which this is our main, and it's going to say unresolved compilation problem. Write cannot be resolved to a variable. So that's telling you that there's a problem with this and a variable. Usually you can track it down, but if you're having a question, you can always come over here to line 15 and say, oh, got it. And back again, we're able to run. Now, if a program compiles, that means that the syntax or the language you used is correct. That does not always mean, however, that you have programmed everything correct. You could have used, if we put, say, 66 in here, that's not the weight on the moon, and so therefore it will give you an answer. It will just give you the wrong answer. So at this point, I'm going to ask if there are questions. See if that chat box fires up. Danielle, do you have any questions?
No.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, I'm good.
All right. Well, while we're waiting on that, let's go ahead and hop over to our next chapter. Okay, that's good, Michelle. So our chapter 4 objectives are to build your first program, assign values to things, and apply operators to create new values. Obviously, I just showed you a program, but your first program is nothing like that. In fact, your first program should be something more like this. We're going to go ahead and go into our source. This one I don't have a package for, so we'll create a package for real quick. Right, yeah. We'll create a class, and we're going to name it hello. We're going to not do the normal, not Zach. So that's what we named it. Notice right here, it's named it hello, not Zach. And your first assignment will be something to the effect of this. Hello, not Zach, but Java class. And so once you create a simple program like that, you're going to save it, and you're going to run it. And then you're going to send me a screenshot of this, I believe, and you're also going to send me the Java file. Now, this is probably, might be one of the more confusing parts. All I want is the Java file, and you can find that by going into your workspace. And that is typically, if you let it set, is under Users, Workspace. And if you notice this right here, matches up with these over here. And so you're going to go to 187. You're going to go to your source. You're going to go to com. You're going to go to Smith, or in your name. You're going to go to 4, and you're going to send me this file right here. And you can do that two ways. When you go into your canvas, you can go through all of that, or you can copy this, and just copy it and drop it on your desktop, if I could ever find my desktop, and you can paste it there, and then you can upload it from there, whichever's easiest for you.
I was looking at yours designs.
Oh, that's fine. Assign value to things. Well, what's a value to things? Let's assign a value. So we can assign a value. We're going to say this is a number, and we assigned a value. There we go. We have assigned a value. We'll look at a double. We'll say this is num, and we'll assign the value of 34.45 there. And what did I do wrong? If you said you didn't put a semicolon, you are absolutely correct. A string, we assigned a value. Now, in this case, we're going to assign a value right here. So we've assigned a value. You also have float. Won't use float very much, so I'm not going to go into it right now. It's more confusing than it's worth. You will come across it after you've gotten used to the basics. You will also use a char, and we'll just call this one letter. And now, this is important. A char is a single letter. Now, if you notice, we'll put a char in here. You notice it's still giving us an error. And the reason for that is that double quotes are for strings. And so if you look at the error, it says, hey, if you want to use double quotes, change this to a string. But in fact, we want to leave it a char, and the way that you do that is with a single quote. And now it went away. These are going to be your primaries that you're going to deal with for a while, so that's what we're going to focus on for now. Let's go back here. Apply operators to create new values. Okay. So let's create a new value. Let's create a double. We're going to call this new. Oh, no, let's not call it new. Let's call this num3 for fun. And we're going to take our integer, which is num, and let's go ahead and multiply that by num with 2 m's. And now we've created a new value. Now, what is num3? What is the value of that? Well, it should be 34.45 times 12. I don't know that off the top of my head, and thank goodness we're programmers, so we're just going to say, let Java do the work for us. Let's go ahead and run it, and there it is. It's 413.4. See, let Java do the work for us. And let's see, let's go ahead and look at anything else here that we want to come across. Last week, we went over the test, and I gave you samples of the hard questions. This one is not too terribly hard. This goes over what we did setting up the package, your projects, tells you where to find it. Pretty simple stuff here now that you've seen it, because you can always come right back to the video. Explain the differences. We have talked about this, and I'm going to let you make sure that you found that. And there is a quiz. Let's look at this real quick and see. All right. The thing being assigned, you can figure that out. Explain the difference. Okay, short and long. I left these three you won't use that often. I've left that to you to read your textbook and explain, but they're pretty simple. Importing, that's under your statement. Let's talk about Boolean real quick. A Boolean is a true or false statement. That's it. It's either true or it's false. Zach is on this course, true or false. It's about 11 o'clock in the morning in Japan, true or false, or Okinawa, actually, I believe. So we're dealing with true or false, and you use those to evaluate statements. A good example that you may evaluate is if, let's say that you're writing a program for Allsups, and they want to make sure that you don't sell cigarettes to minors. So the question is, are you over 18? And you take the ID and you put in the date, and it says, if this age is greater than 18 or equal to 18, thumbs up, they can buy a cigarette. If it's less than, it's get out of here, don't come back. So those are types of situations where you will use if statements and Boolean factors. Also, you may want to set a value to always be true unless you tell it to be false. So that way you can use a do while loop. And we'll work on those as we go further into programming. But be aware that Boolean is really important. You also have the three operators. You have the double ampersand, the double pipe. Those are and or statements. They can get a little confusing if they get really long, but basically we're saying if this is true and this is true, do this, else do that. Or you can say if this is true or that is true, do that. That's what Boolean is. But remember, it's always about true or false. And we will be building them pretty regular. At the end of this class, you'll have a pretty solid grasp on programming those. Well, I think that covers everything from Chapter 4 that I'm willing to give to you. Hopefully it has been informative. Are there any other questions or things that you just want to look at from previous lessons? Let's see here. Let's see. Michelle sent me a question. I'm going to go ahead and answer it to the group. And it says basically that it's safe to say that this class and Linux go hand in hand with one another. Absolutely. If you did while loops and do while for loops in Linux, they're nearly identical. Just a little bit of syntax error as how you tell the computer how to evaluate those statements, but absolutely they go hand in hand. One of the things that's really important to understand is that there's a lot of programming languages out there. But predominantly you have the C family, which is C, C++, C#. And way back when Java came out, it came out as a way to clean up some of the problems with C. And from there you have the family that followed Java. Java is very well distributed throughout the world. They say more than 3,000 devices run it. All your Android phones, all of your Android smart devices. Of course, it's hard to have a computer that doesn't need to update Java. And so it is very, very well distributed throughout the world. And the concepts that are used in either C or Java apply directly down to Linux. Linux is although written in C, Java and Python are typically where it's used the most anymore. And so those skills that you begin to develop in these fundamental programming will help you in every programming language that you want to learn, and it will make you better at areas like Linux because you will be writing a lot of code in Java that directly translates over, or maybe just a small syntax error. We got another question. Is there an IDE for mobile devices like for Java? Yes, there is. As a matter of fact, it's the main one is put out by Android Developer, which is just much like this Eclipse IDE. It just has some more gadgets so that you can incorporate pictures easier, for your buttons and your backgrounds and stuff. But it is straight Java. It runs Maven and a couple of other things, but it does the behind the scenes, so all you need to know is Java. Also, there is an Android plugin for Eclipse, so you never even have to move off Eclipse if you like. All right. Well, if there's no more questions, I appreciate you guys for showing up today and putting up with my congested baritone. And if you have any questions, like always, feel free to shoot me a message anytime. Michelle, thanks for showing up. That's pretty awesome. I have to say that I've worked for your father-in-law for years, and he is an outstanding man and has amazing things to say about you. So hopefully one of these days you're this neck of the woods and like to say hi. Everything else, I'm going to go ahead and cut it off. Watch your announcements for tomorrow for the video, and hopefully tomorrow afternoon it'll be up. We're setting up a new area to host them, and it'll be available to you not only during the duration of this class, but for as long as the internet stands, hopefully much longer than any of us will ever care. So they will be available to you always, and just as a way to help you go back and cover the things you've learned. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I'm going to stop that screen share and stop the recording, and we will talk to you when time allows. Have a good day. Bye.